Some stories sweep across lifetimes. Others flash by in the blink of an eye. But today's film, Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. 2024, does both, folding decades into a single pulse. We begin by stepping into the shoes of a man who has made chaos into an art form. A detective who navigates the world not by the rulebook, but by instinct and wit, carrying both his humor and his wounds like a badge. Feeling the stakes that bind his fate, we watch as his past collides with the present in a city that has changed but never lost its sheen of illusion. What follows is not just another chapter in his story. It is a return, a reflection, and a reimagining of what it means to survive in a place that glitters with promise but thrives on deception. The moment the camera opens on the familiar rhythm of Detroit, the energy feels electric, yet tinged with nostalgia. The streets, once alive with Axel's reckless improvisations, now carry the echoes of those memories like old vinyl records spinning faintly in the background. The years have not dulled his sharp tongue or his quick thinking, but time has added a weight that lingers in his eyes. There's a sense that life has taken pieces from him along the way. And while he can still crack a joke at a crook's expense, something deeper simmers beneath. It's this duality, this collision between the man he was and the man he has become, that sets the stage for what unfolds. We are reminded quickly that the past never stays buried. When his daughter's life is pulled into the whirlwind of a dangerous case, the story veers from nostalgia into urgency. It is not only the ghosts of old villains that return, but also the haunting realization that the city he once played like a game board has evolved into a chess match with far deadlier stakes. Axel's Detroit is a place he knows like his own heartbeat, but Beverly Hills, the land of manicured lawns, sun-washed mansions, and hollow smiles, remains an arena of contradictions, a place that both empowers and endangers him. The film moves like a memory, flickering back to life, weaving together the street-smart improvisation that made Axel legendary with the vulnerabilities of a man facing the inevitable erosion of time. He is still fast, still cunning, still irreverent. But there are cracks now, subtle moments where exhaustion peeks through, where laughter doesn't mask the truth as effortlessly as before. Watching him spar with both allies and adversaries feels like watching a boxer return to the ring. The reflexes are there, the charm is intact, but there's a layer of danger, not from the punches themselves, but from how long he can keep taking them. This isn't merely a retread of old glory. There's something woven into the fabric of the story that acknowledges the weight of legacy. The idea that a man who once lived entirely for himself, dancing on the edge of chaos, is now confronted with the responsibility of protecting the only family tether he has left. His daughter, Jane, doesn't see him as the mythic trickster detective the audience remembers. To her, he is flawed, frustrating, and absent in ways that cut far deeper than any professional shortcoming. And so the central conflict isn't just the unraveling of a conspiracy that stretches across jurisdictions and power structures. It's also the unraveling of a strained bond between father and daughter, set against the glittering facades of Beverly Hills. The first brush with danger hits with a rush of adrenaline. Old enemies reappear like shadows stepping back into the spotlight, while new adversaries emerge from the polished corridors of influence and corruption. Axel, ever the improviser, maneuvers through their traps with a blend of humor and audacity that makes even the most dire situations strangely exhilarating. There's a scene early on where a standoff spirals into chaos, and instead of intimidation, Axel leans into absurdity, dismantling the moment with a joke so perfectly timed it cuts the tension in half. But beneath that laughter is the chilling reminder that the stakes are higher than ever, that bullets fly straighter when aimed at those you love. The film thrives on its rhythm, alternating between moments of explosive action and those quiet beats where Axel faces himself. One of the most striking elements is the way the narrative teases the audience with memories of the past, glimpses of old friends, familiar banter with Taggart and Billy, callbacks that feel less like fan service and more like echoes of time, folding in on itself. These moments carry both comfort and melancholy, reminding us that while Axel hasn't truly changed at his core, the world around him has shifted dramatically. It is here, in this dance between past and present, that the tension sharpens. The plot teases us with layers of deception, a conspiracy involving those who wear badges and those who manipulate from behind gilded doors. It whispers the unsettling truth that justice, even in the hands of the sharpest detective, can be warped when money and power blur the lines. Axel charges into this storm head first, but for perhaps the first time, it isn't only his own survival at stake. It's the survival of the one person who matters most. Every twist feels like a reminder that time is running out, not only in the sense of the ticking clock of the case, but in the sense of Axel's own journey. There's an urgency that feels different from the reckless chases of his younger years. It's more desperate, more raw. The stakes aren't about proving himself anymore. They're about redemption, about making sure his daughter never has to inherit the dangers that have followed him his whole life. The story teases us with its mystery, layering every scene with the possibility that the person Axel trusts least might be the one holding the key. Each revelation leads to another question, another tightening of the noose, until even the allies feel like suspects. The streets of Beverly Hills, once comic relief in their absurd opulence, now feel sinister, their gleaming surfaces hiding rot beneath. It's a perfect mirror for Axel's own journey. The laughter, the wit, the bright facade, all masking a deeper and darker truth. And yet, through it all, the film never loses its heartbeat of humor. The banter cuts through the danger like oxygen, reminding us that Axel's greatest weapon has always been his refusal to take the world too seriously, even when it threatens to crush him. His wit is a shield, his laughter a rebellion against forces that demand fear. It's this balance of comedy and tension that keeps the audience leaning forward, unsure of whether to laugh or hold their breath. By the time the story sets its pieces in place for the storm to come, we are both exhilarated and uneasy. We've been reminded of why Axel mattered in the first place. Not just because he could outsmart anyone, but because he could do it while making us laugh, while making us care. But now, the promise of what's ahead feels heavier than ever. A conspiracy looms, old friendships are tested, and the fragile thread of family is stretched to its breaking point. The film whispers that the past has returned for a reckoning, and Axel is caught between the life he's always lived and the life he's only just begun to fight for. This is not just a return. It is a confrontation with time, with legacy, with love and loss. And as the story teases the battles to come, we know one thing for certain. This is a ride we won't soon forget. The streets hum with a rhythm that only Axel can hear. Detroit has always been his home ground, a place that matches his chaos beat for beat. The film begins by painting this world in vivid strokes: snow-dusted streets, corners alive with noise, old warehouses leaning against the wind like tired giants. The years have pressed on him, but his walk is the same, loose, cocky, a man who knows the ground beneath him even when it threatens to shift. What's different now is the weight he carries, something that flickers behind his grin. It starts with a job gone wrong. Though with Axel, nothing ever truly goes wrong. It simply bends into another shape. A sting operation meant to look simple enough suddenly combusts in a noise and gunfire. But Axel improvises the way only he can. There's a chase through alleyways and frozen backstreets, his laughter carrying through the chaos like a soundtrack to the madness. He's older now, sure, but the city hasn't forgotten how to keep up with him. In fact, it feels like Detroit has been waiting for him to spark this kind of trouble again. What he doesn't expect is the phone call. It's short, clipped, the kind that knocks the smile out of him before the words even finish. His daughter is in trouble. Not in the ordinary way children scrape their knees or make the wrong friends. No, this is something deeper, a threat that stretches far beyond Detroit. Beverly Hills calls him back like a ghost, its sunlight too bright, its promises too sharp. He knows before he packs a bag that this won't be just another case. This will be personal. The first act takes its time weaving nostalgia with danger. When Axel lands in Los Angeles, there's a deliberate sense of dislocation. The city he once mocked for its palm trees and polished facades feels foreign, even threatening. He makes his way through familiar boulevards, the kind that once made him feel like an alien in a land of endless wealth. But now the stakes make everything sharper. This isn't about sticking it to the rich or making fools of the unprepared. This is about Jane. She's grown into a life of her own, distanced from her father in ways that cut deeper than she'll admit. Her disdain isn't loud, but it's there in every clipped remark, every glance that suggests years of absence have left scars no badge could cover. The tension between them becomes the emotional fuse that lights the story. Axel, always quick with a joke, tries to smooth the edges with humor, but it falls flat. Jane isn't impressed by his antics. She's tired of them. She doesn't want to be part of his carnival of chaos. Yet here she is, pulled into the swirl by threats she can't escape alone. Their conversations cut sharper than any firefight. For the first time, Axel's greatest challenge isn't outwitting criminals. It's convincing his daughter that he's worth trusting. From here, the first half unfolds like a series of escalating tests. Axel reconnects with old allies, each reunion tinged with memory. Billy Rosewood, still brimming with loyalty, greets him with the kind of warmth that makes the years between them dissolve. Taggart, more cautious and reserved, reminds Axel that time has changed them all, but the bond is unbreakable. Their banter carries the charm of old times, but there's a gravity now, a sense that this isn't just another case for laughs. The threat reveals itself slowly. A cartel operating under the thin disguise of legitimate business has tangled itself deep into Beverly Hills' glistening infrastructure. The police department is compromised. The very systems Axel once danced through are now booby-trapped with corruption. Early investigations lead him through absurdly wealthy estates, security firms that are little more than fronts, and parties where danger hides behind champagne glasses. Each encounter ratchets the stakes higher, each clue pointing toward a conspiracy more dangerous than he anticipated. One standout sequence has Axel crashing an exclusive Beverly Hills party. The scene feels like a deliberate echo of his younger days, out of place, uninvited, blending irreverence with instinct. But this time the stakes are deadlier. When masked gunmen storm the gathering, the tension leaps from comedy into chaos. Axel improvises with his surroundings, turning hors d'oeuvres into weapons, champagne corks into distractions. But beneath the laughter is a grim reminder. Someone powerful is watching, and Jane is the leverage. What gives the first half its pulse is the push and pull between light-hearted banter and the gravity of family. Axel is forced to confront his failings, not in a courtroom or back alley, but in his daughter's eyes. Each time she flinches from his jokes, each time she questions his judgment, we see the cracks widen. He is a man who has spent his life outsmarting everyone else, only to discover he may not be able to outsmart the pain he's caused at home. As the conspiracy deepens, Axel and Jane are thrust into the crosshairs of enemies who play a longer, deadlier game. The first half crescendos with a daring chase through the neon-lit streets of Los Angeles. Cars weave like serpents through traffic, helicopters thunder overhead, and Axel, laughing even as glass shatters around him, clings to the hope that his daughter might finally see that beneath the chaos lies a man desperate to protect her. But the final moments of this first half don't bring resolution. They bring betrayal. Someone inside the system, someone meant to protect, has been feeding information to the enemy. The sense of safety collapses in an instant. Jane, caught in the middle, becomes more than a target. She becomes the bait in a trap designed to break Axel once and for all. The screen fades into tension, leaving us on the edge. Axel, standing in the wreckage of trust, knows the storm is only beginning. The city gleams with false promises, and beneath it lies a rot that demands a fight fiercer than any he's faced before. The second half opens like a bruise spreading beneath the skin. Slow at first, then undeniable. The fallout from betrayal has left Axel standing in a world where every ally looks like an enemy, where every shadow seems to whisper danger. His humor is still there, a shield he raises when bullets and barbs fly, but even that humor has sharpened into something darker, more desperate. He knows now that Jane isn't just in the crossfire. She's the key. Whoever orchestrates this conspiracy isn't satisfied with threatening her. They want to use her to dismantle him from the inside out. The tension deepens as Axel's circle narrows. Taggart and Billy rally to his side, old warhorses unwilling to watch their friend drown in a sea of corruption. Their presence is more than nostalgic comfort. It's the reminder that brotherhood, once forged in chaos, still holds when the world tilts. But even together, they find themselves playing catch-up against adversaries who are always one step ahead. Files vanish, leads dissolve into smoke, and Jane's every move is monitored as though the enemy has eyes stitched into the city itself. Axel knows the only way forward is to shake the tree, to make enough noise that the rotten fruit comes tumbling down. What follows is a series of bold improvisations that feel like vintage Axel, yet carry a graver weight. He bluffs his way into a heavily guarded high-rise office, cracking jokes at suits who'd rather see him dead, only to uncover a file linking the cartel to high-ranking officials. The scene brims with tension, laughter ricocheting against the walls like gunfire, until the humor dissolves into a brutal firefight that leaves Axel bleeding but unbroken. The heart of this second half, though, isn't in the chases or the shootouts. It's in the fragile rebuilding of a bond between father and daughter. Jane, once distant and skeptical, begins to see past the bravado. When Axel takes a bullet meant for her during an ambush, collapsing with a laugh that's more grimace than grin, she finally glimpses the truth. This man who has failed her in 1,000 small ways will never fail her when it matters most. Their quiet conversation afterward, Axel brushing off the pain with jokes even as his hands shake, becomes the emotional fulcrum of the film. It isn't forgiveness, not yet, but it's a crack in the wall she's built around herself. As the story barrels toward its climax, Axel and his allies unravel the conspiracy thread by thread. They discover that the cartel's reach extends into the police department itself, a cancer growing where justice should live. The revelation stings, for Axel has always lived on the edge of respect for the badge, mocking its rigidity while believing in its purpose. To see it so corroded, so willing to sacrifice innocence for profit, ignites a fury that strips away his laughter. For once, Axel isn't just fighting for survival. He's fighting for the soul of the system that shaped him. The film builds to a crescendo with a nighttime raid on a sprawling Beverly Hills mansion, a grotesque palace of wealth turned fortress. Helicopters churn overhead, spotlights slicing through the dark as Axel, Jane, and his allies push forward against impossible odds. The sequence is relentless, filled with close-quarters combat, glass shattering, and Axel's voice cutting through it all with taunts that sound more like war cries than jokes. Jane proves herself here, too. Resourceful, sharp, no longer the damsel in danger, but a partner who refuses to let her father carry the burden alone. But the storm doesn't end at the gates. Inside, Axel comes face to face with the orchestrator of it all, a figure cloaked in power, someone who is hidden behind polished veneers and political shields. The confrontation is more than physical, it's philosophical. Axel, the eternal trickster, stands against an enemy who thrives on order, control, and manipulation. Their duel unfolds in a mix of fists, bullets, and words, Axel mocking the villain's arrogance even as blood trickles down his face. The turning point arrives when Jane herself intervenes. With the kind of courage Axel has spent a lifetime hoping to pass down, she outsmarts the villain in a way that mirrors her father's style. Quick thinking, fearless improvisation. In that moment, the generational divide collapses. Axel isn't just saving her. She's saving him, too, reminding him that his legacy isn't in the cases he solved, but in the resilience he inspired. The finale erupts into a blaze of noise and fire. The mansion, symbol of corrupted wealth, becomes a collapsing stage as Axel and his allies drag the villain into the light of justice. Explosions ripple across the property, the night sky lit with the fiery echo of decades of corruption burning away. Axel, battered and limping, stands amid the wreckage with Jane at his side. For the first time, the laughter that escapes him isn't a mask. It's relief, tinged with the knowledge that he may finally have earned a second chance with his daughter. The closing moments are quieter, more reflective. Axel, back in Detroit, watches Jane prepare to leave for her own life. Their words are simple, but the weight is profound. She doesn't forgive everything, but she acknowledges the man behind the chaos, the father behind the detective. As she walks away, Axel smiles, not the cocky grin of old, but the weary, genuine smile of a man who has made peace with the pieces of himself. The camera lingers on him one last time, framed by the streets that raised him before fading to black. It's both an ending and a beginning, a closing of one chapter and the spark of another. Axel's world may always be chaos, but for the first time in years, he isn't facing it alone. Every film carries stories that exist just beyond the frame, whispered through anecdotes, accidents, and the strange alchemy of creativity colliding with chaos. This one is no different. In fact, its journey from rumor to reality is littered with twists that could have been lifted straight from Axel's own playbook. The strangest fact behind this return are not just curiosities. They are testaments to how persistence, luck, and serendipity can shape the very texture of a movie. For years, the idea of reviving Axel's story felt like smoke with no fire. Discussions began as early as the mid-1990s, long after the trilogy had cemented itself in pop culture. Scripts were written and discarded, directors signed on and departed, and each new announcement seemed destined to collapse. There were versions that imagined Axel training a new generation of cops, others that would have placed him in New York or even abroad. One draft leaned so heavily on slapstick comedy that producers feared it would tarnish the detective's legacy. Another was so dark and violent it threatened to lose the charm that defined him. What makes this history strange is that for almost 30 years, the movie existed more as a ghost than a plan, whispered in trade papers, joked about by Eddie Murphy himself, and long presumed dead. The resurrection finally took form in the most unlikely way, through streaming. Paramount, which had housed the franchise from the beginning, struggled to decide whether another sequel could find a theatrical audience. Then came Netflix, hungry for nostalgic IP with global reach. What had seemed like a risky gamble suddenly became a calculated bet. The strangest twist here is that the very platform that once threatened cinema's traditional model became the savior of one of its most beloved franchises. Without Netflix, Axel's return might still be gathering dust in some forgotten drawer. Even stranger was Eddie Murphy's own stance over the years. For decades, he dismissed sequel talk with the kind of sardonic wit only he could deliver. He would say, half joking, that he wouldn't make another unless the script was absolutely perfect. In interviews, he quipped that Axel Foley was a character too easy to mess up, that one wrong line could turn the whole thing into parody. Yet, when the right story finally landed on his desk, Murphy threw himself into it with an enthusiasm that surprised even longtime collaborators. In interviews, he quipped that Axel Foley was a character too easy to mess up, that one wrong line could turn the whole thing into parody. Yet, when the right story finally landed on his desk, Murphy threw himself into it with an enthusiasm that surprised even longtime collaborators. The oddity lies in how the man who once resisted the idea became its fiercest advocate, shaping dialogue, improvising moments, and guiding tone. On set, the strangest alchemy emerged from generational collision. Eddie Murphy, seasoned with decades of comedic instinct, found himself alongside Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Taylour Paige, actors who grew up watching his films rather than working beside him. There was a story that circulated about the first table read. Murphy cracked a joke mid-scene, not part of the script, and the younger cast broke character completely, laughing so hard the read-through had to pause. The director later admitted that the joke wasn't even that funny. It was the sheer surrealism of hearing Axel Foley's voice again in a room full of people who had only ever known him as a memory. Another peculiar detail: the police station interiors were reconstructed with eerie precision to match the look of the original films. Set designers scoured archives, dug through old production stills, and even hunted down vintage furniture that hadn't been manufactured in decades. One desk, scratched and dented from use, was tracked down in a warehouse in Georgia, refurbished just enough to survive close-ups, then shipped to Los Angeles for filming. The crew joked that the set felt haunted, as though the ghosts of the original trilogy lingered in every filing cabinet and buzzing fluorescent light. Filming, however, wasn't without its bizarre accidents. During one action sequence involving a helicopter stunt, weather unexpectedly shifted, throwing high winds across the set. A prop billboard collapsed, narrowly missing crew members. What could have been disastrous ended up being folded into the film itself. The director realized the chaos actually heightened the scene's authenticity, and rather than reshooting under calm skies, they leaned into the storm. When you watch the sequence, the frantic energy isn't just acting. It's the cast and crew adapting to real danger in real time. Murphy's improvisations produced some of the strangest behind-the-scenes moments. He has always thrived on spontaneity, and here, decades later, his instincts hadn't dulled. During a tense standoff scene, he began mocking the villain's expensive shoes, something not in the script. The line was so sharp, so absurd, that the crew broke in a laughter mid-take. Rather than cut, the director encouraged Murphy to run with it, reshaping the tone of the moment. What's fascinating is how these unscripted bursts created some of the film's most memorable beats, proving that Axel Foley is not merely written but lived through Eddie Murphy's timing. One of the oddest technical challenges came from blending the sound of Detroit with the sound of Beverly Hills. Foley artists, ironically, the same craft Axel's surname calls to mind, spent months layering audio textures. They recorded the low hum of Detroit traffic during winter, then contrasted it with the faint buzz of palm trees swaying in Beverly Hills heat. The strange part is how subtle these layers are. Most viewers will never consciously notice them. Yet together they create a sensory bridge that tells the audience exactly where they are without a single establishing shot. The music carries its own peculiar tale. Harold Faltermeyer's iconic Axel F theme, immortalized in pop culture, had to be updated without losing its identity. Composers experimented with everything from orchestral variations to electronic distortions, even trying a version played on traditional African instruments. In the end, the final cut blended old synth lines with modern beats, a strange marriage of past and present that mirrors Axel's own journey. The oddity is that one of the discarded variations, a heavy metal guitar riff, became a favorite on set, with crew members blasting it during breaks like an unofficial anthem. Perhaps the strangest fact of all lies in how the city of Detroit itself embraced production. Locals turned out by the hundreds to watch filming, shouting lines from the original movies at Murphy between takes. At one point, a fan yelled a quote so perfectly timed during a quiet street scene that Murphy broke character, laughed, and shouted back. The moment was unusable for the film, but the director later described it as the most surreal collision of fiction and reality he had ever witnessed. Detroit wasn't just a backdrop. It became a living participant in the story. And then there is the strangest twist of legacy. The film almost wasn't titled the way it was. Early drafts carried working titles like Axel Foley Returns or Beverly Hills Cop, Resurrection. It wasn't until Murphy himself suggested shortening it to Axel F that the creative team realized the power of simplicity. The name itself carried enough weight, enough history, that nothing more was needed. In a way, it was the strangest and simplest decision of all, to trust that two words could summon decades of laughter, chaos, and cinematic memory. What lingers after exploring these facts is the sense that the film is as much a product of accident and persistence as it is of planning. Scripts lost and rewritten, sets haunted by their own history, accidents folded into art, improvisations reshaping tone. This is a movie born not only from vision, but from strangeness itself. Like Axel, it thrives on unpredictability, stumbling into brilliance by refusing to take the safe route. And maybe that is the strangest fact of all, that after decades of delays and doubts, this long-awaited chapter emerged not in spite of its chaos, but because of it. From the moment the story unfurls, it invites not just laughter and adrenaline, but reflection. To watch Axel navigate this new chapter is to confront questions about legacy, time, and the fragile line between justice and corruption. Critical perspectives on the film are less about whether the bullets fly straight or the car chases thrill. They are about what the story dares to say about the man at its center, the city that frames him, and the society that has shifted around him. One of the most striking critical observations lies in how the film balances nostalgia with progression. Sequels that arrive decades later often drown in callbacks, unable to stand without leaning heavily on past glories. Yet here, nostalgia serves as seasoning, not the main course. Critics have noted how the film acknowledges its history without becoming beholden to it. Cameos and references to old allies are woven not for cheap applause, but as narrative anchors, grounding Axel's journey in continuity. The return of Taggart and Billy, for example, is not simply a wink to fans, but a meditation on loyalty and the endurance of friendship. From a critical standpoint, this choice prevents the story from collapsing under its own legacy, allowing it instead to grow roots in new soil. Another recurring perspective emphasizes the emotional weight of Axel's relationship with Jane. While earlier films thrived on his improvisational bravado, this chapter introduces an intimacy that critics argue transforms the narrative. No longer is Axel the lone wolf disrupting the order of Beverly Hills. Now he's a father forced to reckon with absence, regret, and the terrifying fragility of love. For some, this shift elevates the film into unexpected territory, turning comedy and action into conduits for a more profound story about family. For others, it risks slowing the pacing, weighing down the breezy energy with heavier themes. Yet even critics who bristle at the tonal shift acknowledge its ambition to give depth to a character who might otherwise have become a caricature of his former self. Thematically, the film's portrayal of corruption has drawn sharp commentary. In earlier entries, villains were often outsized personalities, drug lords, smugglers, crooks easy to mock and defeat. Here, the enemy is harder to pin down, corruption within the very institutions Axel once believed in. Critics argue that this choice reflects contemporary anxieties about systems failing their people, about justice warped by wealth and influence. By positioning Axel against compromised police departments and polished businessmen, the film mirrors societal fears that the line between protector and predator is thinner than we'd like to believe. From a critical perspective, this grounds the comedy in relevance, even if it means the laughter sometimes carries a bitter aftertaste. Eddie Murphy's performance has been a focal point of discussion. Many critics point out how seamlessly he slips back into Axel's skin, as though no years have passed. His timing remains razor-sharp, his grin disarming, his improvisations electric. Yet they also note a subtle shift. Beneath the humor lies a gravity that wasn't always present before. The younger Axel laughed because he could. The older Axel laughs because he must. It's this evolution that critics hail as the film's greatest triumph. Murphy does not simply resurrect a character. He reshapes him, acknowledging time's passage without surrendering the essence that made Axel unforgettable. Some perspectives, however, highlight the risks of such tonal balancing. The film's action sequences are grander, slicker, and more explosive than ever, fueled by modern technology and Netflix's deep pockets. But this very gloss raises questions. Does the sheen of high-budget production rob Axel of his grit? Some critics argue that the more polished the explosions, the less authentic Axel feels. They point to the raw, guerrilla-style chaos of the original films as a defining feature, one that CGI and slick editing can never replicate. For them, the greatest danger isn't an Axel facing villains too powerful. It's an Axel being swallowed by spectacle too shiny. On the other hand, there are those who see this evolution as natural. Axel has aged, so has the medium. To present him in a film that ignores the advancements of cinema would be to fossilize him, trapping him in amber. Instead, critics who celebrate the scale argue that the bigger explosions and sharper chases only serve to magnify Axel's improvisational brilliance. Where other heroes might be swallowed by spectacle, Axel thrives in it, bending the chaos to his rhythm. His humor, his instinct, his ability to turn absurdity into survival. all shine brighter against the backdrop of modern spectacle. Another key perspective revolves around generational legacy. Jane's role isn't simply narrative, it is thematic. Critics have observed how her skepticism embodies the modern audience's own hesitation toward reviving old franchises. Just as Jane doubts her father's reliability, viewers doubt whether Axel's return can be meaningful. The film's success in bridging that skepticism mirrors Axel's success in earning back his daughter's trust. From a critical lens, this becomes almost meta. The narrative becomes a commentary on its own existence. Jane forgiving Axel, even partially, is the audience forgiving the franchise for daring to return. The cultural resonance of humor also comes under scrutiny. Axel's sharp tongue, his willingness to mock authority, feels timeless, but some critics question whether such irreverence plays the same in today's climate. In the 1980s, Axel's humor was subversive, a jab at institutions revered without question. In today's world, where cynicism toward authority is rampant, does his humor lose its edge? Some argue yes, claiming that Axel risks blending into the very noise of skepticism that defines modern culture. Others counter that his irreverence now carries a different power, not rebellion against blind faith, but resilience in the face of disillusionment. In this light, Axel doesn't merely mock the system. He survives it, reminding audiences that laughter can still pierce despair. Reception has been equally fascinating to dissect. Fans of the original trilogy embrace the return with the warmth of reunion, forgiving flaws in pacing or polish simply for the joy of hearing Axel's laugh again. Younger audiences, less tethered to nostalgia, judged the film more harshly, weighing it against modern action comedies with sharper cynicism. Critics stand divided. Some hail it as a triumphant resurrection. Others see it as a comfortable yet unnecessary retread. Yet almost all agree on one point. Eddie Murphy's performance transcends criticism. Whatever one thinks of the script or spectacle, watching him slip into Axel's rhythm again is an undeniable joy. The most poignant critical perspective, however, revolves around time itself. Sequels decades apart are not merely movies. They are mirrors held up to both characters and audiences. Axel's aging becomes our own. The laugh lines etched into his face reflect our own years of waiting, our own journeys through change. The film, in this sense, is less about solving a case and more about confronting what it means to return to a city, to a story, to a self. Critics who tap into this angle argue that the film's truest success lies not in action or humor, but in memory, in the way it forces us to measure who we were when we first met Axel against who we are now. In the end, critical perspectives converge on a single truth. This film is not flawless, nor does it pretend to be. What it offers instead is honesty. It is messy, nostalgic, daring, and uneven, just like Axel himself. And perhaps that is its greatest achievement. By refusing to smooth over its rough edges, it mirrors the man at its center, reminding us that heroes do not need to be perfect to be unforgettable. The making of a film that carries both legacy and expectation is never a quiet affair. This one, in particular, was a storm long before cameras even rolled, a storm made of decades of delays, rewrites, shifting studios, and the stubborn determination of artists who refused to let Axel fade into memory. To step behind the curtain of its production is to see a journey that mirrors the character himself, chaotic, unpredictable, and, somehow, always landing on its feet with a smirk. The earliest seeds of production trace back to the 1990s, when the third chapter of the saga closed with a whimper rather than a roar. Fans clamored for more, but the industry, uncertain of Eddie Murphy's evolving stardom, hesitated. Scripts floated around, dozens of them, each promising to capture lightning in a bottle once more. Some pitched Axel as a mentor, others transplanted him into new cities, some even toyed with retiring him in favor of a fresh protagonist. What all of them shared was failure. They could not capture the anarchic magic of the original films, nor the balance between comedy and tension that made Axel iconic. It wasn't until Netflix entered the equation that momentum returned. By then, The world had changed. Streaming had grown into a juggernaut, and nostalgia-driven projects became one of its most reliable currencies. Executives realized that Axel was more than a character. He was a cultural landmark, one whose laughter and chaos resonated across generations. And so, production was revived, this time with the resources of a global platform willing to take risks. The decision itself felt like an act of improvisation, not unlike Axel's own methods. Unexpected, slightly reckless, and yet perfectly timed. Choosing a director was no small feat. Mark Molloy, known more for commercials and short-form storytelling than feature films, stepped into the role with a blend of humility and boldness. At first, his name puzzled fans. Why entrust a beloved franchise to a relative newcomer? But Molloy brought with him a sharp eye for visual flair and a knack for balancing style with substance. His lack of baggage proved to be an asset. He wasn't trying to replicate the past, but to reimagine it with respect. Crew members later noted that Molloy's greatest strength was listening. He treated Eddie Murphy not just as a star, but as a creative partner, weaving his improvisations into the fabric of the script. Filming itself carried stories that blended the absurd with the profound. One anecdote tells of Murphy refusing to rehearse certain comedic scenes. He insisted that spontaneity was key, that Axel's charm came not from precision, but from chaos. So, the crew often rolled cameras without warning, catching his improvisations raw. Some of the funniest lines in the film weren't in the script. They were born in the moment, when Murphy cracked a joke at a crew member or when he riffed off the awkward silence of a co-star. The director encouraged this, reshaping scenes to accommodate laughter that no writer could have predicted. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, stepping into the role of a younger detective opposite Murphy, often spoke of how surreal it felt to watch a master at work. During one scene, he reportedly struggled to keep a straight face, breaking take after take, because Murphy's timing was impossible to resist. Eventually, they left his laughter in, reframing the moment as part of the character's dynamic with Axel. Production became a playground where the line between mistake and genius blurred, where accidents were gifts rather than setbacks. The action sequences, however, demanded a different kind of discipline. One chase through the crowded streets of Los Angeles involved over 100 stunt performers, dozens of cars, and a carefully orchestrated ballet of chaos. The production team prided themselves on using practical stunts wherever possible, echoing the spirit of the original films. Cars flipped, glass shattered, and explosions roared, not as pixels generated in post-production, but as fireballs carefully choreographed with pyrotechnic crews. Stunt coordinators later admitted that the challenge wasn't just the danger. It was keeping up with Murphy's instinct to improvise. If he decided mid-scene to grab a traffic cone or mock a driver, the entire choreography had to pivot on a dime. Set design carried its own peculiar triumphs. The police station, as mentioned before, was reconstructed with obsessive detail. But beyond that, Beverly Hills itself became both stage and character. Filming in such a city, with its wealthy residents and tight restrictions, was no small feat. Crew members shared stories of negotiating with homeowners associations, bribing with promises of donations, and even filming guerrilla style in certain locations when permits lagged. The irony was not lost on anyone. Just as Axel once crashed parties uninvited, the production itself sometimes snuck into Beverly Hills under the radar. Music was another battlefield of creativity. Harold Faltermeyer's legendary theme had to be preserved, yet evolved. The composers wrestled with this balance for months, producing countless variations. Eddie Murphy himself reportedly vetoed several versions, insisting the soul of Axel lay in that synth riff. The final cut became a hybrid, marrying nostalgia with pulse-pounding modernity. During breaks, the crew blasted older versions of the track, sometimes dancing in the streets between takes, turning filming days into spontaneous block parties. There were challenges, of course, weather delays, injuries, budget overruns. One strange but memorable incident involved a scene shot in Detroit during a snowstorm. The storm wasn't planned. It arrived overnight, threatening to derail the schedule. But instead of postponing, Molloy leaned into it. The snow became part of the atmosphere, painting Detroit with a starkness that added weight to Axel's opening scenes. What could have been a disaster transformed into one of the film's most visually striking sequences. Fun facts circulated like legends on set. One story claims Eddie Murphy insisted on driving his own stunt car during a chase sequence, despite insurance protests. The director compromised, allowing him to handle a few controlled shots, and sure enough, Murphy delivered with the same reckless glee that defined Axel decades earlier. Another tale describes how Taylour Paige, who played Jane, outperformed veteran stunt drivers during training, leaving the crew astonished. Her determination to embody Jane's resilience bled into her behind-the-scenes efforts, earning her the respect of everyone on set. Perhaps the most touching production insight is how the cast and crew treated the project as a family reunion. Many crew members had worked on earlier films in return for this one, bringing with them decades of memory. Between takes, they shared stories of filming in the 1980s, of Eddie's meteoric rise, of nights spent laughing until dawn. This atmosphere of nostalgia, wrapped in camaraderie, infused the set with warmth, even when the work itself was grueling. When filming finally wrapped, there was a quiet sense of triumph. The project that had been stuck in development purgatory for decades, the project no one believed would ever truly happen, was finally real. The final day ended not with fireworks, but with applause, crew members clapping for Murphy as he delivered his last line. He grinned, slipped back into Axel's swagger one final time, and cracked a joke about how he'd only come back again if Netflix doubled his paycheck. Looking back, what makes the production of this film fascinating is how it mirrors Axel's very spirit. Improvisation shaped its humor, accidents became art, nostalgia fueled its heart, and resilience carried it across obstacles. It was never smooth, never predictable, never perfect, but it was alive, brimming with the kind of energy that can't be manufactured. And like Axel himself, it thrived in the mess, proving that sometimes chaos is the most creative force of all. The world of Axel Foley has always existed in stark contrasts, a cinematic playground where grit collides with glamour. In this new chapter, the setting becomes more than a backdrop. It becomes the soul of the story, breathing life into every chase, every laugh, every heartbreak. To step into its landscapes is to wander through memory and evolution at once, guided by the geography of two very different cities that shape Axel's fate. The story opens in Detroit, and instantly, the city asserts itself as a character. The winter air bites, the streets echo with the sounds of engines coughing against the cold, and the architecture leans heavy with history. Detroit is unpolished, industrial, a place where resilience is forged in steel and sweat. The cinematography lingers on the worn bricks of old warehouses, the skeletal frames of factories long abandoned, and the snow-covered streets glowing under weak streetlights. Each frame seems to whisper of survival, of a city scarred but unbroken. For Axel, this is home, not because it is comfortable, but because it mirrors him. He too is scarred, battered by time, yet still unwilling to fold. The camera doesn't shy away from Detroit's roughness. It embraces it, framing the city as both cradle and cage. In the opening sequences, when Axel navigates through chases and shootouts, the city itself feels complicit, alleyways narrowing like traps, frozen intersections slick with danger. The cinematographers use handheld shots and muted palettes here, evoking a sense of immediacy, as though we are sprinting alongside him, feeling the breath in our lungs freeze. It's a city stripped of pretense, a world where nothing comes easy, and it sets the perfect stage for a man who thrives in chaos. Then the narrative shifts to Beverly Hills, and with it, the tone transforms. The transition is almost jarring, deliberately so. Where Detroit is muted steel and snow, Beverly Hills is bathed in golden light. Palms sway lazily against endless skies, mansions glisten behind high gates, and streets hum with a kind of curated perfection. Yet beneath this sunshine lies rot, and the cinematography ensures we never forget it. Wide shots of gleaming storefronts slowly dissolve into close-ups of eyes watching from tinted car windows. Pools shimmer like jewels, but feel more like traps reflecting false tranquility. The film uses this duality to great effect. Beverly Hills is not simply wealth. It is wealth weaponized, beauty that hides its teeth. One of the most striking elements is how the film visually contrasts Axel against this world. In Detroit, he blends seamlessly, his scrappy energy reflecting the city's grit. In Beverly Hills, he stands out like graffiti on marble. The cinematography amplifies this by framing him slightly off-center, capturing him at angles that emphasize his discomfort in this polished environment. This choice makes him appear both comic and tragic, an intruder in a world that will never fully accept him, yet a disruptor whose presence is exactly what it needs. Action sequences become showcases of setting as much as spectacle. A car chase through Detroit's icy streets feels raw, dangerous, almost documentary-like in its realism. Tires slip, headlights blur against falling snow, and the sound design layers the crunch of ice beneath the roar of engines. In Beverly Hills, by contrast, a chase explodes in vibrant absurdity. Axel barrels through pristine neighborhoods, his reckless maneuvers sending fountains of manicured hedges flying, sprinklers erupting in glittering arcs as cars tear across lawns never meant for chaos. These moments highlight not only his improvisational survival, but also the absurdity of inserting Detroit grit into Beverly Hills polish. The film also uses architecture to mirror emotional states. When Axel reconnects with old friends, the scenes unfold in spaces heavy with nostalgia. Dimly lit bars, cluttered offices, stations buzzing with a familiarity that feels almost sacred. These intimate spaces feel warm, even when the dialogue cuts sharp. By contrast, Jane's scenes often occur in sterile, modern settings. Her apartment with its minimalist decor, offices washed in cold whites and blues. The design subtly emphasizes her distance from Axel, a woman who has built a life away from the clutter and chaos that defines him. Only when their stories intertwine does the design begin to blend. Her sterile spaces disrupted by his presence, his cluttered ones softened by her influence. Lighting plays an equally critical role in shaping mood. Detroit is lit in blues and grays, natural light often blocked by clouds or filtered through grime. The result is a city that feels grounded in realism, a place where survival is a daily negotiation. Beverly Hills, on the other hand, glows with exaggerated warmth, sunsets dripping in gold, as if mocking the corruption beneath. Night sequences their lean into neon, splashing streets with pinks and purples that echo the artificiality of the environment. The clash of these palettes mirrors Axel's own internal struggle, caught between authenticity and illusion, between grit and gloss. Sound design, too, becomes a setting of its own. Detroit hums with machinery, trains rattling in the distance, the muffled thump of bass from passing cars. It is a soundscape alive with working-class rhythm. Beverly Hills replaces this with the buzz of electric gates opening, the clink of champagne glasses, the faint rustle of palm leaves in manicured silence. Yet, amid these distinct soundscapes, the music bridges them both. Faltermeyer's theme threads across cities, shifting in tempo and texture depending on location. In Detroit, it's raw, synth-heavy, almost gritty. In Beverly Hills, it swells with polish, layered with modern beats. The theme becomes the glue, Axel's pulse connecting two cities that would otherwise never speak the same language. Music sessions added to the magic. Harold Faltermeyer returned to consult on the iconic theme, and when the updated version was first played on set, the atmosphere shifted. Crew members danced, extras clapped along, and Murphy, ever the entertainer, performed a mock routine that had everyone howling. The theme wasn't just a soundtrack. It was a spell, summoning decades of memory and weaving it into the present. Even meals became part of the story. Murphy, Gordon-Levitt, and Paige often ate together during breaks, their table attracting other cast members until it became the unofficial heart of the production. Stories flowed. Murphy recounting tales from the original trilogy, Gordon-Levitt sharing insights about indie filmmaking, Paige discussing her approach to building emotional truth in performance. These conversations shaped their on-screen chemistry, grounding their relationships in genuine camaraderie. But for all the laughter, there were also moments of exhaustion. Long night shoots left the cast bleary-eyed, tempers sometimes flaring under the strain. Crew members remember one particularly grueling week when scenes kept running long and equipment failures delayed progress. Yet even then, Murphy's humor became the balm. He cracked jokes, teased crew members, and once commandeered the director's megaphone to lead an impromptu sing-along just to lift morale. The final rap brought emotions to the surface. After months of living in Axel's world, saying goodbye wasn't easy. On the last day, Molloy thanked the cast and crew, his voice cracking as he acknowledged the weight of reviving such an iconic story. Murphy responded with a quip about Axel Foley never saying goodbye, just disappearing until the next paycheck, but even he grew visibly moved. The applause was thunderous, not just for the work completed, but for the improbable journey that had brought them all there. Behind the scenes, the story was one of resilience, laughter, and trust, mirroring the very themes woven into the film itself. Improvisations blurred into script, accidents turned into opportunities, and friendships grew out of chaos. Just as Axel thrives in unpredictable storms, so too did this production, proving that sometimes the best stories are born not in control, but in surrendering to the wild, unpredictable rhythm of creation. Stories like Axel Foley's have always been draped in laughter, but beneath the quips and explosions lies something weightier. In this newest chapter, the humor is still the hook, but the story spine is built on themes that run deeper than nostalgia. Symbolism seeps into the smallest details, the architecture of the cities, the fractures of a family, even the cadence of a joke. To walk through its themes is to uncover the undercurrent of meaning that makes the chaos resonate. At the center beats the theme of legacy. Axel's return isn't just about solving another case. It's about confronting the long shadow of a life lived on impulse. For years, he defined himself by his ability to outwit criminals and mock authority. But the arrival of Jane pulls him into new territory. Fatherhood, responsibility, the terrifying prospect of being measured not by cases cracked, but by love given or withheld. Legacy here isn't abstract. It's alive in his daughter's disappointment. Every time Jane looks at him, Axel is reminded that the past isn't a trophy, but a debt. Critics have pointed out that this tension redefines the detective archetype. Axel isn't simply chasing justice. He's chasing redemption. Family becomes the most poignant theme, particularly the strained bond between father and daughter. Jane represents the cost of Axel's choices, a symbol of the years he spent prioritizing the badge over the home. She isn't written as a cliché damsel in distress, but as a mirror, reflecting back Axel's absence, his mistakes, his refusal to grow up. Their arc together transforms the narrative from simple cop comedy to generational story. In Jane's sharp words and guarded expressions, we see the child who waited too long for her father to come home. In Axel's fumbling attempts to connect, we see a man terrified not of bullets, but of rejection. Symbolically, every chase and shootout is layered with a deeper chase for reconciliation. Another theme thrumming through the film is corruption, not just in institutions but in ideals. Axel's world has always been one where the absurdity of power is ripe for mockery, but here the laughter carries sharper edges. The villains are not cartoonish thugs. They are polished officials and businessmen who thrive on illusion. Beverly Hills itself becomes a symbol of corruption masked by beauty, a world where golden sunsets hide shadows stretching long. This theme resonates with the present moment, where distrust in systems runs deep. Axel's irreverence, once rebellious in a playful way, now feels like defiance in a world that demands obedience to compromised authority. Detroit and Beverly Hills serve as dual symbols, embodying Axel's own contradictions. Detroit, gritty and cold, represents authenticity, scarred but real, stripped of glamour, yet brimming with resilience. It is Axel's core, the part of him that laughs at danger because he's lived with it every day. Beverly Hills, meanwhile, embodies illusion, wealth polished into armor, beauty weaponized to disguise decay. Axel doesn't belong here, and the cinematography reinforces it. Wide golden frames that make him appear small, out of place, like graffiti on marble. Yet as the story unfolds, Beverly Hills bends under his chaos, its perfection cracking, symbolizing how authenticity can disrupt illusion. Humor itself becomes a theme, not just a device. Axel's laughter has always been his shield, but here it symbolizes survival. Every joke cracked in the face of death is a refusal to yield, a rebellion against fear. Yet humor also symbolizes distance, his way of avoiding vulnerability, of masking regret. Jane's rejection of his jokes early on embodies this truth. The weapon that once kept him alive is now the very barrier keeping him from love. By the time she begins to laugh with him, however briefly, it symbolizes not just comic relief, but healing, the bridge built through shared humor. Time weaves through the film as another central theme. Axel is older, slower, yet still sharp. The years hang on him, and the story doesn't shy away from it. His age symbolizes the weight of history, not only his own, but the history of cinema itself. Watching him chase suspects through Beverly Hills again is both thrilling and sobering, a reminder that time spares no one. The film itself becomes a meditation on return, on what it means to step back into a role decades later. It invites the audience to measure their own time against his, to reflect on where they were when Axel first made them laugh, and where they are now. Symbolically, the settings represent more than geography. Detroit is Axel's past, the truth he cannot escape. Beverly Hills is his challenge, the illusion he must tear through to protect what matters most. The interplay between the two forces Axel into confrontation not only with villains, but with himself. Critics have noted how the film deliberately blurs the lines by staging its climax in Beverly Hills, but shooting it with Detroit's grit. Handheld cameras, rough editing, muted palettes, transforming the polished city into Axel's battlefield. In doing so, the setting itself evolves, becoming less a symbol of wealth and more a mirror of the chaos Axel thrives in. Even smaller locations carry weight. The police station, meticulously reconstructed, embodies institutional decay and resilience at once. The mansion used for the climactic showdown isn't merely opulent. It is grotesque, its gilded halls echoing with the emptiness of power built on fear. Rooftops, back alleys, garages, all become stages where Axel's improvisation takes center stage, where setting itself bends to his will. Ultimately, the film's use of setting and cinematic elements underscores its themes. Cities become metaphors for identity, lighting becomes a canvas for emotion, and soundscapes become reflections of truth versus illusion. In Detroit, Axel belongs to the chaos. In Beverly Hills, he disrupts the order. Together, the two environments weave a story not just about a detective on a case, but about a man caught between two worlds, both of which reveal who he truly is. By the end, the settings linger as strongly as the characters. We remember the bite of Detroit's wind, the mocking glow of Beverly Hills' sunsets, the hum of their contradictions. These places do not fade into the background. They burn into memory, shaping not only Axel's story, but our own experience of it. The film does not just tell us where Axel is. It makes us feel it in our bones, until cities themselves become inseparable from the man who moves through them. Behind the laughter, the gunfire, and the chase sequences, the making of this film unfolded like its own wild caper. An off-screen story filled with unexpected friendships, improvisations, and challenges that tested everyone's resolve. Stepping behind the curtain reveals a world where cast and crew navigated chaos, much like Axel himself. shaping a project that was as much lived as it was filmed. From the outset, there was an electricity on set. The return of Eddie Murphy as Axel wasn't just another casting decision. It was a reunion with a cultural icon. Crew members have spoken about the surreal experience of hearing that laugh echo across sound stages again. On the first day of shooting, when Murphy slipped into character for the opening take, the entire crew broke into applause before the director even called cut. It set the tone. This wasn't just work, it was history being reborn. Murphy's presence brought both professionalism and unpredictability. He was known to improvise lines at will, sometimes rewriting entire scenes with a single offhand joke. Directors often dread such unpredictability, but Molloy embraced it, realizing that Axel lived in those unscripted moments. One story tells of a tense sequence where Murphy was supposed to intimidate a suspect. Instead, he began mocking the man's haircut, riffing for nearly 2 minutes. The crew was in stitches. The actor playing the suspect completely broke character, and the scene had to be res-hot multiple times. Yet when they reviewed the footage, Molloy decided to keep the improvisation, recognizing it as quintessential Axel. The dynamic between Murphy and Joseph Gordon-Levitt became a highlight off-screen as well as on. Gordon-Levitt, meticulous and disciplined, often rehearsed his lines to perfection, while Murphy thrived on chaos. The two developed a playful rivalry, with Gordon-Levitt attempting to anticipate Murphy's improvisations and Murphy delighting in throwing curveballs his way. Their rapport became so natural that some of their best exchanges were unscripted, their banter spilling over from behind the camera to within the story itself. Crew members joked that watching them work was like seeing jazz and classical music trying to play the same song. Different approaches, but when they collided, the result was magic. Taylour Paige, playing Jane, carried her own unique weight. As the emotional anchor of the story, she had to hold her ground opposite Murphy's whirlwind energy. Behind the scenes, Paige often described the experience as learning to surf a wave. She never knew when Murphy would change the rhythm, but instead of resisting, she leaned into it, letting his unpredictability sharpen her own performance. Offset, she bonded with Murphy over long conversations about family and legacy, their discussions informing the father-daughter tension on screen. The warmth between them when cameras weren't rolling lent credibility to the fragility of their bond in the film. Production wasn't without its hurdles. Scheduling became a recurring challenge. Murphy's availability was limited, and the ensemble cast juggled other commitments. At one point, an entire week of shooting had to be rearranged because a storm grounded flights out of Detroit. Rather than waste time, Molloy pivoted, shooting interior scenes in Los Angeles that had originally been scheduled for later. This flexibility mirrored Axel's own improvisational style. The production survived by adapting, never breaking stride. Stunts created their own set of behind-the-scenes stories. Murphy, now older but still insisting on doing as much as possible himself, surprised the stunt team by requesting to handle a high-speed driving sequence. Insurance balked, but the stunt coordinator allowed him to film a carefully controlled version. Murphy nailed it with gleeful precision, laughing as tires screeched and cameras rolled. Later, he admitted that the thrill of those few takes made him feel 20 years younger. Gordon-Levitt also immersed himself in stunt training, determined not to rely solely on doubles. During rehearsals, he practiced fight choreography so intensely that the stunt coordinator remarked he could pass as a trained martial artist. Perhaps the most chaotic behind-the-scenes moment occurred during a Beverly Hills location shoot. The production had secured a permit to film outside a luxury store, but when word spread, crowds of fans gathered. At one point, Murphy stepped outside in full costume, and the crowd erupted with chants of Axel. Axel! The noise grew so overwhelming that filming had to pause. Rather than retreat, Murphy leaned into the moment, cracking jokes with the crowd, even improvising a mock police routine with a fan. The footage from that day was unusable, but the energy carried back on his set, lifting spirits for weeks afterward. Molloy faced his own challenges stepping into the director's chair. With this being his first major feature, the pressure was immense. Crew members often noted how he balanced humility with confidence, leaning on veterans while insisting on keeping his own vision intact. His collaborative spirit won over the cast, particularly Murphy, who was notoriously protective of Axel's character. Molloy's greatest triumph may have been recognizing that the film wasn't about reinventing Axel, but about letting him grow naturally, like an old song. Stunts and action choreography leaned heavily on practical effects, a conscious homage to the franchise's roots. Car flips were performed with real vehicles, explosions ignited with pyrotechnics rather than CGI. The decision added logistical challenges, insurance nightmares, rehearsals stretching long into nights, but the authenticity shines on screen. Critics noted how the physicality of these stunts carried weight that computer-generated spectacle often lacks. When Axel leaps from a car, we feel the danger because the danger was real. Camera work often framed Axel as slightly off balance, deliberately keeping him just outside the perfect center of the frame. This technique subtly conveys his outsider status in Beverly Hills. Meanwhile, Jane is often framed dead center, symmetrical and composed, reflecting her desire for order. As their relationship evolves, framing shifts. Shots of the two together slowly find symmetry, symbolizing their tentative bond. It's a quiet technique, almost invisible unless you look for it, but it carries emotional resonance. Dialogue itself was treated as a form of improvisational jazz. Eddie Murphy's instinct for spontaneity shaped entire scenes. The director encouraged multiple takes where Murphy riffed freely, later selecting cuts that balanced humor with narrative momentum. This choice reflects a technique rooted in trust. The trust that Axel's essence lives not in scripted lines, but in rhythm, timing, and tone. Box office production, meanwhile, reveals its own fascinating story. The film was born in the streaming era, produced under Netflix's banner with a budget reportedly around $150 million. Yet its release strategy was hybrid, limited theatrical runs in select cities to qualify for awards and cater to nostalgic fans, followed by a global streaming premiere. This approach reflects the industry's shifting landscape. Axel returned not to multiplex dominance, but to living rooms worldwide. Critics debated this move. Some argued it denied audiences the collective thrill of watching Axel on the big screen, while others hailed it as democratizing access, ensuring his laugh reached corners of the world that a theatrical run never could. The production itself carried risks. Decades in development hell had made the project infamous, with studios wary of financial missteps. Yet Netflix's investment strategy hinged on recognizable IP driving subscriptions, and Axel's return fit the bill. The gamble paid off. Within days of release, the film soared into Netflix's top 10 globally, sparking conversations across generations. While exact box office figures were less relevant in a streaming context, analysts estimated that the buzz and subscriber engagement rivaled mid-tier theatrical blockbusters. The irony is sharp. A character born in the heyday of VHS rentals became a flagship of the digital streaming era. Symbolically, the very act of its production tells a story of resilience. A project that had been announced, canceled, rewritten, and shelved for nearly 3 decades finally emerged. Not because the industry demanded it, but because audiences never stopped caring. The persistence of this film reflects Axel's own ethos. You could delay him, underestimate him, even write him off, but he always finds a way back, laughing through the chaos. In sum, the filmmaking techniques here work like threads in a tapestry, weaving nostalgia with innovation. Cinematography contrasts cities like personalities. Lighting reveals illusion versus truth. Editing mirrors chaos and stillness. Sound design roots us in place. Music bridges decades. Stunts remind us of authenticity. Even the production strategy itself speaks to changing times. Together, they craft not just a film but a statement. Axel's story is timeless, yet it can evolve, thriving in any era so long as it carries laughter, grit, and heart. The craft of filmmaking often hides in plain sight, woven into camera angles, soundscapes, and rhythms that carry us without our noticing. In Axel Foley's latest chapter, these techniques are not just tools. They're the scaffolding that allows nostalgia to stand tall beside modernity. Every choice, from the hum of a Detroit street to the gloss of a Beverly Hills sunset, was designed to remind us of where Axel came from and show us who he has become. To examine the techniques here is to peel back the artistry that makes the film not just a story, but an experience. Cinematography is the most immediate brushstroke. The filmmakers leaned into contrast to tell Axel's journey visually. Detroit's sequences were captured with handheld cameras and muted palettes, grays, blues, and sharp whites from snow reflecting against steel. The shaky intimacy of handheld work pulls us into the grit, the city feeling alive and raw, almost documentary-like. By contrast, Beverly Hills was filmed with sweeping crane shots and stabilized Steadicam work. Wide frames bathed in gold and pastel hues painted as a dream, almost too perfect, an illusion begging to be shattered. This duality in technique symbolizes the clash between authenticity and artifice, grounding the emotional themes of the narrative. Lighting was another deliberate weapon. In Detroit, shadows dominate. Fluorescent bulbs buzz weakly in warehouses, and sunlight filters through grime-streaked windows. These choices mirror Axel's unpolished reality. Beverly Hills flips the palette. Golden hour exteriors saturate the screen, while interiors gleam with sterile, white light. Night scenes take on neon tones, echoing the synthetic charm of the city. In the climactic mansion sequence, lighting becomes symbolic. Chandeliers burst into sparks during shootouts, illuminating the emptiness of wealth even as it collapses. Each beam of light is more than an aesthetic. It's a commentary on the truths and illusions Axel navigates. Editing carries the pulse of the film. Chase sequences are cut with razor-sharp speed, quick cuts that mimic Axel's improvisation, making viewers feel as though the camera itself is barely keeping up with him. Dialogue scenes, however, are allowed to breathe. Long takes linger on Axel's exchanges with Jane, the camera refusing to cut away from silences or uncomfortable glances. This contrast in editing rhythm mirrors the split in Axel's life. Chaos in the streets, slow reckoning in the heart. Sound design shapes mood as much as image. In Detroit, we hear the metallic rattle of trains, the crunch of snow, the growl of engines, all layered into a soundscape that feels heavy, industrial. Beverly Hills trades this for the subtle buzz of sprinklers, the whir of luxury cars, the faint hum of opulence. But sound becomes most powerful in action. Bullets ricochet with unnerving clarity, tires screech with bone-deep resonance, and silence often precedes chaos. One standout technique involves moments of muffled audio during near-death experiences. Axel's hearing briefly dulled as explosions erupt, plunging us into his disorientation. It's a trick used sparingly, but each time it yanks the viewer into his perspective, forcing us to feel the fragility of survival. Symbolism radiates even in smaller details. Cars, for instance, symbolize freedom and chaos. Axel's reckless driving, once comic exaggeration, now feels like a metaphor for his life. Speeding forward with no plan, veering dangerously but somehow surviving. The mansion in the climax becomes a symbol of hollow power, its gilded walls crumbling under the weight of fire and bullets. Even music becomes symbolic. The updated Axel F theme bridges past and present, symbolizing continuity in the face of change. Violence, too, carries symbolic resonance. Axel has always danced in chaos, but here the violence feels heavier, less cartoonish. Each bullet is a reminder that he is not invincible, that time has slowed his reflexes, that mortality hovers. Yet his survival, his refusal to bow, symbolizes resilience. It suggests that laughter and grit can coexist with fragility, that heroes need not be flawless to endure. One of the more subtle themes is identity. Axel has always been an outsider in Beverly Hills, a man defined by his refusal to assimilate. This film leans into that, making his outsider status symbolic of authenticity, resisting illusion. Where others conform, Axel disrupts. Where others speak politely, he mocks. In this way, Axel becomes less a detective and more a trickster archetype, the fool who exposes truth by refusing to play the game. His very existence in Beverly Hills becomes a critique of its culture, his irreverence tearing down walls that wealth hides behind. Finally, the film is saturated with the theme of redemption. For Axel, redemption isn't about career or glory. It's about family. It's about Jane. Every decision he makes carries the weight of that pursuit, not of erasing the past, but of proving that even flawed men can change, even broken bonds can be mended. The final act, where Jane joins him in outsmarting the villain, symbolizes the passing of legacy not as burden, but as strength. In that moment, redemption is realized not in words, but in shared survival. When the credits roll, what lingers is not just the memory of car chases or jokes. It is the resonance of these themes: legacy confronting absence, humor masking pain, authenticity battling illusion, corruption devouring justice, time reminding us of mortality, redemption offering hope. The symbols, the cities, the cars, the music, the laughter are not decoration. They're the marrow of the story, the silent truths that make the chaos meaningful. In the end, this isn't just another case for Axel Foley. It is a parable about survival in a world that has changed, about finding meaning in laughter even when it hurts, about choosing to show up when it matters most. And perhaps that is the deepest symbolism of all, that a man who has spent his life laughing at danger finally learns to laugh with love. The craft of filmmaking often hides in plain sight, woven into camera angles, soundscapes, and rhythms that carry us without our noticing. In Axel Foley's latest chapter, these techniques are not just tools. They're the scaffolding that allows nostalgia to stand tall beside modernity. Every choice, from the hum of a Detroit street to the gloss of a Beverly Hills sunset, was designed to remind us of where Axel came from and show us who he has become. To examine the techniques here is to peel back the artistry that makes the film not just a story, but an experience. Cinematography is the most immediate brushstroke. The filmmakers leaned into contrast to tell Axel's journey visually. Detroit's sequences were captured with handheld cameras and muted palettes, grays, blues, and sharp whites from snow reflecting against steel. The shaky intimacy of handheld work pulls us into the grit, the city feeling alive and raw, almost documentary-like. By contrast, Beverly Hills was filmed with sweeping crane shots and stabilized Steadicam work. Wide frames bathed in gold and pastel hues painted as a dream, almost too perfect, an illusion begging to be shattered. This duality in technique symbolizes the clash between authenticity and artifice, grounding the emotional themes of the narrative. Lighting was another deliberate weapon. In Detroit, shadows dominate, fluorescent bulbs buzz weakly in warehouses, and sunlight filters through grime-streaked windows. These choices mirror Axel's unpolished reality. Beverly Hills flips the palette. Golden hour exteriors saturate the screen, while interiors gleam with sterile, white light. Night scenes take on neon tones, echoing the synthetic charm of the city. In the climactic mansion sequence, lighting becomes symbolic. Chandeliers burst into sparks during shootouts, illuminating the emptiness of wealth even as it collapses. Each beam of light is more than an aesthetic. It's a commentary on the truths and illusions Axel navigates. Editing carries the pulse of the film. Chase sequences are cut with razor-sharp speed, quick cuts that mimic Axel's improvisation, making viewers feel as though the camera itself is barely keeping up with him. Dialogue scenes, however, are allowed to breathe. Long takes linger on Axel's exchanges with Jane, the camera refusing to cut away from silences or uncomfortable glances. This contrast in editing rhythm mirrors the split in Axel's life. Chaos in the streets, slow reckoning in the heart. Sound design shapes mood as much as image. In Detroit, we hear the metallic rattle of trains, the crunch of snow, the growl of engines, all layered into a soundscape that feels heavy, industrial. Beverly Hills trades this for the subtle buzz of sprinklers, the whir of luxury cars, the faint hum of opulence. But sound becomes most powerful in action. Bullets ricochet with unnerving clarity, tires screech with bone-deep resonance, and silence often precedes chaos. One standout technique involves moments of muffled audio during near-death experiences. Axel's hearing briefly dulled as explosions erupt, plunging us into his disorientation. It's a trick used sparingly, but each time it yanks the viewer into his perspective, forcing us to feel the fragility of survival. The music bridges past and present. Harold Faltermeyer's Axel F returns, but updated with modern beats, layered synths, and even orchestral backing. The filmmakers were careful not to dilute its identity. They played with variations throughout, slower, more reflective versions during Axel's quiet moments, adrenaline-charged remixes during chases. One particularly symbolic use comes during a father-daughter scene, where the theme is stripped down to a single piano melody, intimate and fragile. The music becomes not just a motif but a character, carrying Axel's identity through shifting tones.